The streets of Brookdale were always busy, but on that cold evening, silence hung in the air for a different reason. A small crowd had gathered near the police station. People whispered, pointing at a fragile woman in her late 30s, her clothes torn, her dignity crushed. Her name was Marielle Dovins, a woman known in her neighborhood for her gentle smile and the way she often shared food with children who had nothing. Yet tonight, Marielle stood surrounded by officers who sneered at her, mocking her appearance. "Look at her," one officer laughed. "Acting all innocent, but we know her type." Another officer shoved her lightly, and the crowd gasped. It was humiliation, deliberate and cruel. But what no one in that crowd knew was that Marielle wasn't alone. Her husband, Seagal, had been quietly informed of what was happening. He was on his way. The hook of the story lay not just in who Stephen was, but in how kindness had built the very foundation of their lives. Long before this incident, Marielle and Stephen had lived by one rule: always choose compassion, even when the world chooses cruelty. Years ago, before Stephen was known, Marielle had been the one who rescued him, not from physical danger, but from himself. He had been a broken man once, a martial artist who had lost direction. It was Marielle's kindness, her belief that a man could rise again, that pulled him from darkness. And that same kindness now flowed through every choice they made as a couple. Marielle, even while being humiliated, looked at the officers and said softly, "I forgive you. Whatever anger you have, I won't return it with hate." The crowd murmured. Who could forgive in such a moment? Who could stand tall when dignity was being stripped away? That was Marielle's strength. Kindness, even when she was weakest. Just as an officer raised his voice again, Steven Seagal's shadow appeared. His towering frame silenced the noise instantly. With calm but commanding presence, he walked straight through the crowd. His eyes didn't burn with rage, rather with controlled power. "Is this," Steven said slowly, "how men sworn to protect treat a woman?" His voice was steady, each word sharp. The officers froze. They hadn't realized who she was married to. Steven didn't attack. He didn't shout. Instead, he did something unexpected. He reached for Marielle's hand, held it firmly, and looked into her eyes. "You don't need to answer them. You've already won." And then, instead of violence, Steven taught them a lesson in kindness. He made them face the truth, that their strength was nothing but weakness when used to harm. He reminded them of the oath they once took, of the humanity they were meant to uphold. The officers shifted uncomfortably. The crowd now looked at Marielle not with pity, but with respect. Because despite humiliation, she had chosen compassion. And Steven had stood by her, proving that true strength is in kindness, not cruelty. The lesson was clear. Humiliation can break you, but kindness can rebuild what cruelty tries to destroy. And as the crowd dispersed, Marielle whispered to Steven, "Thank you for reminding me that even in pain, kindness is never wasted." He smiled, replying, "And thank you for teaching me that lesson years ago." The night after the humiliation incident, Brookdale was buzzing with rumors. But for Marielle and Steven, life was about moving forward. They didn't want revenge, they wanted to help. That same week, they heard about a boy named Elian Frost, a 12-year-old who had been living on the streets after his father was arrested and his mother fell ill. Elian was known for sitting quietly outside the bakery, his eyes fixed not on the bread but on the families walking by, wishing he had one. Marielle, still healing from the public ordeal, felt drawn to him. "Steven," she said one morning, "do you see him? He's not asking for anything. He just waits, as if he hopes someone will notice." Steven nodded. "Then we'll notice." The couple began leaving food for Elian, but they didn't stop there. They sat with him, asked about his dreams, and discovered a boy who loved to draw. His notebooks were filled with sketches, buildings, heroes, even imaginary cities. But the pages were torn, the pencils broken. Marielle bought him new supplies. Steven found him a safe place to stay. Slowly, Elian's world began to change. But here's where the story became even more powerful. One day, Steven invited Elian to the dojo. He taught him not just martial arts, but discipline, respect, and self-belief. Strength, Stephen told him, isn't about hurting others. It's about protecting. And sometimes, protecting means helping people stand when they've fallen. Elian absorbed every word. Months passed, and Elian's transformation amazed everyone. He was no longer the silent boy on the street. He was confident, focused, and filled with hope. And then came the day when Elian had his chance to pay it forward. A group of older kids bullied a smaller child outside the bakery. Instead of fighting, Elian stepped in, stood tall, and said, "Leave him alone. You don't need to do this. You're better than this." The bullies laughed at first but eventually walked away, stunned by his confidence. The younger child hugged Elian, whispering, "Thank you." That moment proved that the kindness and help given to one boy had now multiplied. Because help doesn't end with the person receiving it. It spreads, like fire, lighting hearts that were once dark. One evening, Elian turned to Marielle and Stephen. "You saved me," he said softly. Stephen shook his head. "No, Elian. We only gave you a hand. You did the hard part, you chose to rise." Marielle added, "And now you're proof that helping one person can change an entire story." The humiliation they had faced at the hands of the police no longer mattered, because in helping Elian, they had rewritten the meaning of strength and compassion. The world may have tried to shame Marielle, but in return, she and Stephen chose to lift someone else. And that was their victory.